Welcome to another edition of the Big Nick Energy Podcast. Make sure you go check out all of our socials and go to bignickenergy.com to check out all the merch we're doing right now, especially for the holiday season. I got this dope little hat, as you can see. I got a great guest today, Dan Favale. What Valley? Favale, that one, of Bleacher Report and the Hardwood Knocks podcast, the host over there. Dan, how you doing, man?
I am doing spectacular. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I want to jump right into it, Dan. It is the Knicks just played on Christmas. They actually beat the Bucks for the first time in literally 10 tries, and then immediately went up to a young juggernaut in OKC. And I wanted you to pick the topics that we go on from beyond this, but I want to start off first and foremost with Tom Thibodeau's rotations and how we constantly look at, as Knicks fans, why does this guy seem like he's stuck playing a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5 without any real deviation from that, even though we're playing Josh Hart small ball forward sometimes, still really lacking in a lot of deviation otherwise. And then we go up against a team with a point guard, 3 shooting guards, and a center, and they dominate offensively, which really just goes to show how much when you have that much spacing, especially with a 5 that can shoot like Chet, how much the spacing can really allow free-flowing play. And that defense and the versatility allows on defense versus wanting your big matchup against a big yada yada seems to matter more in modern day NBA. So my very first question for you is how many other teams are doing like what the Thunder do versus what we as Knicks fans are used to with Tom Thibodeau trotting out a small forward, a power forward, and a center over and over again?
Yeah, I think I would say at least 23 to 25 of the teams in the league are just going to be more experimentative with their lineups than Tom Thibodeau is. And we've seen him pull
that
different.
Hurts so much to hear.
Yeah. We have seen him pull different levers like in crunch time, but that's more about rolling with the hot hand, it seems like, for him, or who he thinks has it going, which is fine in a nutshell. I think the big sticking point, because you mentioned that they are playing smaller. I don't know if that's by, when you're looking at, okay, Josh Hart, small ball 4, we've seen RJ play the 4. I don't know if that's something that Tibbs actually wants, or it's just, this is the roster I have.
Yeah.
And so that's how I'm going to go with it. The big sticking points, I think the two ones that stand out for me are, you mentioned it, with the traditional center that he's always going to, like the fact that Taj Gibson's just like rolling off the street, playing minutes immediately rather than experimenting more with Julius at the 5, which again, Jericho Sims being injured along with Mitch being injured, that makes it tough. And they don't really have another. What is the other play? I like Julius Randle's not a good center. You're going to bleed points whenever you play him at the 5. And so like, you don't really have another. What are you going to play Josh Hart at the 5? There might be teams that do that. Tom Thibodeau's not going to be a coach that does that. And then I think the one that's more of an issue with this team, because of how small you already are, when you're talking about playing Josh Hart at the 4, or the fact that, okay, RJ Barrett is 6'7", but he's not really a wing. He doesn't play like it. And we saw that in the OKC game specifically, where it's just like, oh, Emmanuel Quickley, they went at him. So like, we're going to throw RJ in, that bigger body. And no, like that's not going to put up any resistance. So why aren't you just trending more with these? We see Jalen Brunson and Emmanuel Quickley play together a good amount, but like, don't be afraid to like throw a third guard in there. Like, why do your team is small to begin with when you're just looking at spots really 1 through 4 during the non-Julius Randle minutes. You should absolutely be experimenting more with these 3 guard setups, or at least leaning on Jalen Brunson and Emmanuel Quickley from the jump more. And it's sort of just like this weird half measure where how much does it actually matter that, okay, you can start DiVincenzo, who's 6'5", compared to Quickley, who's like, what, 6? What is he at? 6'3",
6'2", I think.
6'2". So it's like, what are we really trying to, like, those extra 2 to 3 inches, man? Like, that really matters for us. And so that stubbornness, that element of stubbornness, is definitely frustrating from the outside looking in. But also, if you're a Knicks fan and want to see just some more experimenting, just something a little bit more creative. And that's with the caveat. What Thibodeau does, it works during the regular season and it gets you to a certain point. But I do feel like for a team that is yet to pull off a trade and feels like it's overdue for a trade, that doesn't mean that this is a bad team. It's a very good team. But if you want to make that next step into actual contention to rumble with the Bucks on a regular basis, to not be so, feels like they're overmatched against any team that just rolls out stretch bigs, where it's Boston, where it's even, look, you mentioned OKC spacing. They don't even have great spacing. Like, they're a good 3-point shooting team, but they don't take a lot of threes. It's because they have this stretch big in Chet Holmgren, and it kind of bends the Knicks' defense in a way that it doesn't for some other teams who are willing to experiment with certain things. And I the final thing I'll say, to Thibodeau's credit, a lot of this is a personnel issue because, like, against some of these teams, I don't really know what else you want him to do when you're like playing Julius Randle at center is not the answer against the Boston Celtics. It's not. I mean, and now you're playing.
They'll give up 150 points in that game.
Right. And you're playing Isaiah Hartenstein more, who might be a better matchup for some of those situations. He's now playing more anyway because Mitchell Robinson's injured. So I get that it's not all on Thibodeau, but the guard stuff specifically, it's just like, we don't like stop with the size and needing an actual wing. Like, this team doesn't have actual wings at this point. And so lean into just the lineups that statistically are working, which IQ and Jalen Brunson are just slaughtering everybody. Let's see even more of that. And not just even more of it, start it. Just start it at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's been going around, especially since the OKC game. But I mean, this has already been a thing that's been happening for the past year and a half. Like, since we got Josh Hart, the best lineup the Knicks have had. And it's just really, really noticeable now because it's been showing up the last few games, especially with RJ struggling so bad. It doesn't involve RJ Barrett. It's Jalen Brunson, Emmanuel Quickley, Josh Hart, Julius Randle, and either Mitch or Hartenstein. And both those lineups are outscoring, what is it, by 11 points per 100 possessions, 12 points? Like, that's like top 2 in the league. And they don't play that lineup enough because of RJ Barrett, because of starting DiVincenzo. I love Quentin Grimes. Like, I like him in small spurts like that. When you're saying the 3-guard lineup, I'm literally imagining a world where Jalen Brunson, Emmanuel Quickley, and Quentin Grimes, because Quickley and Grimes are pretty good defensively and interchangeable. Mm-hmm. Quickley's better off ball. Grimes is the best perimeter defender on ball they have. Josh Hart's a close second. You play those 3 guys. You have Hart in without Randle sometimes, and then you still have Hartenstein, which is your still defensive anchor. And they just don't. Tibbs doesn't utilize it that much. And one thing, you said you give Tibbs some credit. I'll give Tibbs some credit. His viewpoint of the 3-point line and his team taking 35, 40 plus threes a game versus it was 7-8 years ago. He has totally adapted that with modern day NBA philosophy offensively. You want to get to the paint. You want to pass out. You want to jack threes. You want to have a high shooting 3-point percentage team. That's how you can like help with a lot of the variance of you guys going against the Bucks, against the Celtics, against the Thunder now, the Timberwolves, like the top of the top teams. 3-point percentage and 3-point variance is what helps you win a game that you're not supposed to necessarily win. And he's really adapted to that. But will he ever get to the point of adapting his defensive philosophy? Or at this point, do you think that's just by the wayside?
I think it's by the wayside just because I think when you look, and I know we're going to get into some trade stuff, but like the fact that they're linked to, and he's a very good player, Daniel Gafford on the trade market. It's no, like, I guess if it's just going to cost you Fournier and like you're going to take back Gafford and another salary and it's a second, fine. But like, you don't need to get this every rep center at this point when Mitchell Robinson is going to be around next season, when you have Isaiah Hartenstein right now and Jericho Sims should eventually be healthy. And so the fact that the Knicks are, and that, who knows how much say Tom Thibodeau has and the types of trade targets they're going out. But the fact that we've only really ever seen them linked to the OG Anunoby wing type player. And then aside from that, it's, well, Dejounte Murray, or like, should we just bring Bojan Bogdanovic in here, who's a 4 and not really a wing anymore? It leads me to believe that, no, we're not going to see him adapt. Though, with that being said, give him the personnel to adapt and see if he does it. And like right now, again, the Quickley Brunson stuff in that lineup, the 2 lineups that you outlined, which by the way are like a plus 30 per 100 possessions, each of them. I think that's plus insane. 28 with Mitch and then plus 33 with Hart. So like that stuff is frustrating, but like if you want to see him, can you at least throw a different type of big on the roster and then see what he does with it? Like that's something I would be interested to see. But no, I mean, we just have how many teams worth of evidence right now? We saw it in Chicago. We saw it in Minnesota. We're seeing it again in New York. And I do think it puts sort of this ceiling on your team, especially in today's NBA. And I think it says a lot about how low the bar is for Thibodeau when it comes to adapting, that we're talking about, yeah, he's really adapted well to like the 3-point volume era. And it's okay. The Knicks are average in 3-point attempt rate. It's not like they're bombing away threes relative to the rest of the league. And so they are where they need to be, I would say at bare minimum. And they are top 10 when you look at accuracy, 3-point shooting team. But if you're top 10 in accuracy, maybe you should also consider being top 10 in actual volume. And that's just not something. So it's, again, he has been a good coach. I called for him to get fired 7 games into last season. I clearly jumped the shark there on that one.
Same.
But there's room for him to be more creative. But I also think there's room for the Knicks to maybe try forcing his hand to be more creative. And I don't think they've done that with the personnel on the roster by and large.
If you were to be the coach for one game, what is the 5-man lineup you think you would run the most?
All right. So illogically, it's just going to be like, let's really, I can't remember if you curse on this podcast or not, but F up stuff at the 5. And I will throw Julius Randle at the 5, and then we'll go with Hart, Quickley, Brunson, and probably Grimes in that equation. Just see what happened. And look, I'm not above not benching Randle entirely, but like I will pull Randle and let's stick Josh Hart at the 5. We'll have Donte DiVincenzo in there, and we'll just run with 5 smalls to see what happens. I do think the one that intrigues me most, and if Mitchell Robinson's healthy, I love Mitchell Robinson, the stuff that he's done. It is the Hartenstein with Jalen Brunson and Quickley. And I think I go Hart at the 4. And I kind of want to see more of what Grimes would look like in that setup. I know the numbers are going to say like there's just higher volume. Like let's keep Randle on the court in that equation. I just like to see more of the data, more extended data with that type of a setup.
I think, I mean, like you said, the net rating is over plus 30 per 100 possessions. Like I want us to see the best 5-man unit we've had in the past 2 years and just actually try to run it for 35 minutes in a game and see how it goes instead of giving them 9 minutes together and giving Emmanuel Quickley 22 minutes a game. I'm going to use that as a segue.
Is the other thing where we don't get to just pencil in Emmanuel Quickley for X amount of minutes per game. One game, it could be 30, it could be 17 the other. And that's nonsensical when you're looking at a player of his caliber.
It's insane. To go into Quickley now, he was averaging 28.9 minutes per game last year when he was second and sixth man of the year. He's averaging 23.9 minutes a game, a literal 5-minute per game drop off this year. In his restricted free agency, gonna be contract year. All signs are pointing to this dude is gonna end up not being on this team based on his them wanting to not. It seems like pigeonhole him into what this his uses or him being the 6th man. The guy's 3rd in points per game if you actually did it per 100 possessions or per 36 minutes. His 3-point percentage went up 2.4 from last year. The team, he has a leading plus 118 on the team, and he's 6th in minutes on the team. And once per game, and then once Hartenstein plays 3 more weeks, he's going to be 7th in minutes per game on this team because both Hart and Mitch will be above him. So Dan, please explain to me, are the Knicks going to keep IQ beyond this? And how does this dude get on the court more?
Yeah. So, I mean, just a couple things on what he's been doing. I am curious to see if they actually start IQ, is there any pullback? Just because in theory, the level of competition, I know he's closed some games, but the level of competition he's facing for then longer spurts is going to be higher. And so it's hard to create that separation. Now, with that said, he's shooting over 40% on catch and shoot threes. He's shooting over 40% on off the dribble threes. He's shooting over 63% on floaters this year. He's hitting his pull-up twos, not just the floaters, but the actual pull-up, jumpers, some of the runners and stuff that or outside the runners and the floaters. That's a big freaking deal. And you know what he does for you defensively. I think that he's a capable facilitator. It'd be nice to see him work within lineups that have even more space or that are going to bomb away a ton of threes. You need to get him more minutes. And what they did is they created a conundrum because they are married in draft equity, in financial equity to RJ Barrett right now. And then you signed Donte DiVincenzo, who is just, let's add another non-wing to this crowded equation. And so you've already seen Quentin Grimes' minutes get pulled back. And yet we can't guarantee as the Knicks that Emmanuel Quickley is going to get X amount of, this dude should be playing 30 minutes a game. And I get that it's tough because there's depth. He should not be playing under 25. That should not be his average. Again, to the Knicks' credit, I will say, even during the darkest, dankest years, they still paid money they went into the tax. The teams were bad. They still paid money for it. If Emmanuel Quickley is going to get an offer sheet that's $25 million a year or whatever it is, I think they would match it just because 1, that's terrible asset management if you don't. And 2, we haven't seen them be scared of spending in the past. And so I think the bigger thing is, does IQ want to be here? And you don't want this disgruntled player who's trying to leave. I mean, it'll say a lot if he goes on the open market and signs an offer sheet. When you see teams and restricted free agents that really value the relationship with one another, that stuff just gets hashed out without them ever going to the open market. Or at least not, aggressively going to the open market. What this is going to come down to And there are some Jalen Brunson's going to be extension eligible this summer. Julius Randle will be there too. Isaiah Hartenstein's a free agent. So there's cost expenditures there. But I think what this ultimately comes down to is I think they will keep IQ unless they move him at this year's trade deadline. I think they'll match whatever offer, just because you can't. You got to get rid of RJ Barrett to, one, sort of open up the financial pipeline at this point, not just for IQ, but you're going to have to now start thinking about Brunson's next deal, Grimes' next deal, if you want to keep him around, Randall's next deal. And then the other, just like to create more minutes for Emmanuel Quickley. You're going to be deathly small with no, actual wings, but RJ Barrett's not playing like an actual wing. And he's one of the most detrimental players in the league right now. And this is someone who is, I think, by and large, been an RJ Barrett believer, I would call myself. And I'm not out on him as a player, but I'm just out on him with this team and him being anything more than this. And the Knicks have now, I criticize them for not giving RJ enough sort of cracks at, well, can he be in lineups with enough spacing or where he's not overlapped with both Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle? We've just seen him in like all these modes and forms now to know that he doesn't warrant the Knicks planning around him to that extent. And so I think the key to making sure Emmanuel Quickley, one, stays or wants to be here in New York, is getting rid of RJ Barrett at this point, like just both financially and functionally. I would be a little surprised though if he's not on the team, just because Emmanuel Quickley, that is, just because to me that would show that the Knicks didn't want to pay him. And that's just not something they've ever really shied away from.
What is a number you think that will be too high? Is there the chance San Antonio offers him I don't even know what the max is he can get, but can you get like $30 million a year from San Antonio, something crazy? And they're just like, we can't rationalize that. What do you think the number would be? That's the crossing point.
I think if someone comes in with, the cap next season is projected to come in at 142. His max starting salary is 35.5. I think once you get to the $30 million range, maybe anything above 30, that might be where they're like, oh, maybe we just let him go. But you're almost sort of, if you don't trade him, you're in the bird rights trap to where, how do you replace this guy? Just because RJ Barrett's already playing too much. And then if you're going to up Quentin Grimes' minutes, like he's not going to give you the same level of juice that Emmanuel Quickley is giving you at both ends of the floor right now, just because of what Emmanuel Quickley can do as a shot maker and off the dribble creator. So I would expect them to keep him, but like that's the number. If a team comes in and it's, let's just say, an average annual value of 30, 4 for 120, or is it 4 for 124 just to get it above 30? That's probably where there's a conversation. I just don't know how you let someone this valuable leave for nothing. And then I know people can say, well, then trade him. Well, one, he's too important to your team right now if you want to be optimized. But two, he's such a small number. What are you getting for Emmanuel Quickley?
It doesn't match anything.
The thing that I've seen floating around is that, and the Knicks aren't going to be concerned with draft picks, but you need a very high draft pick then if you're going to get draft pick as the primary compensation, or he needs to be attached to Barrett and or Fournier as part of some larger trade for a player, quite frankly, that isn't available right now because the names being thrown out, Zach LaVine, we'll get into Dejounte Murray, even like OGN, and I guess OGN and Obi doesn't even seem like he's necessarily readily available. There hasn't been a player mentioned that is worth the Knicks necessarily consolidating into where it's going to cost you quickly. And so I think you have to keep him, but that's not exactly encouraging because you have him and it feels like you're underutilizing him right now.
I agree. I know plus minus is a flawed stat in many ways, just to really throw in perspective of how much of a positive Quickley is it been. Again, I said he's in first place on the team this year at plus 118. Second place is plus 102, which is Josh Hart, which goes to the two of them being part of all the best lineups. Who would have known? The big two of Randall and Brunson are plus 74 for Randall and plus 58 for Brunson. RJ Barrett is a plus 5 on a team that is 4 games over 500. And so it's just, I don't even know.
He started off the year, I was so in when he started off the year like he did. And it's just not there. And I think the biggest detriment for him, the waxing and waning on defense is annoying, but it's just his inability to develop or grow consistently for long stretches as a playmaker is just damning, because this is someone who needs the ball in his hands and doesn't play make for others at a high rate. It's just, it's awful. I thought his extension was fine. And now it's, the key to maybe unlocking Quickley, and if you're worried about the Knicks not paying him, it's that you have to get rid of this dude. And it's, how do you get rid of him? Because you could talk about, well, they'll make a trade for a star or like a fringe star. And it's no, every other team in the league has watched RJ Barrett this year. RJ Barrett is not going to be viewed as a net positive contract, even if you want to bet on his upside. I think right now, my guess would be the best you could do in a vacuum would be a John Collins type trade where it's all right. We didn't have to include any assets to get him off, but we had to wait to the offseason to do it because it was a team that was okay using their cap space on RJ Barrett.
I would have probably suggested someone like DeMar DeRozan because not only that, based on his money, it's like RJ plus Fournier equals almost exactly what DeRozan's making, but he's also a UFA after this year, which then frees up all that money to sign IQ or match the contract. But then you're getting a 1-year rental for a guy that it's not going to really put your team over the top or do anything that much. So,
and the Bulls are going to want to pick.
Yeah.
Based off how poorly RJ has played. That's the other thing there too.
100%. I mean, if it's less than 2, I personally would pull trigger at this point, but it's whatever. To be a little more positive, because the Knicks are going to get into the trade deadline and they do make at least one deal every single year, whether it works or not. Josh Hart being a good example. The Knicks are 17-13 at the time of recording because this is before the Magic game. This will probably come out after the Magic game's done. But thankfully, December is about to be over, which is definitely by far the Knicks' hardest month of the year. 11 of the 14 games are played on the road. Arguably 7 or 8 of the games were against teams with finals like thought processes or finals goals. If you include OKC and like what's happening with that positively, Minnesota and stuff like that. So Dan, let's talk trades, man. I'm not saying what puts this team over the top into that finals realm, because again, I think we're a much better big than Mitchell Robinson. I love Mitch or iHeart away, plus much better guard, consolidating all those guys into what I've been pining for years, and I'm going to continue to pine for, especially as the Suns keep sunning or KDing, is Devin Booker. But let's get into Dejounte Murray. And let's get into, first off, because I don't know too much about it. I know there's a beef. I don't know how much you know. Can you describe the Leon Rose, Rich Paul thing that's been happening for the past 3 years? I know Rich Paul worked with Leon Rose. He started under him in 2006. He left in 2013 to start clutch with LeBron. Since 2013 to now, where did their relationship start being set on fire, and how are they going to finally fix it if they are?
So every time you come up with a reason, there's like sourced reports that that's not the reason. And so I'm led to believe that it's all of the things. It's the fact that Rich Paul went out on his own. It's the fact that LeBron ends up leaving CAA to go with him. It's the fact that I think there were a couple of Knicks players who left.
Nerlens Noel, most notably.
Nerlens Noel. Was Mitchell Robinson one of the dudes that left too? I can't remember, but
I don't know. He went to Wasserman though, so I don't even know why that would matter. He didn't even go to CAA.
But I think that is really the issue here is that it's the genesis of that relationship. And then it's also just the multiple Knicks players then leaving clutch at some point is sort of weird. And also probably the Knicks at one point felt like CAA's tentacles were all over them. And it still feels that way a little bit, but not as much. We know Julius Randle left them. So I think that's just the reason, is that there seems to be just that animosity between, oh, we used to work together, you left, something, then now you have your own agency, the most powerful agency in the league. And granted, Leon Rose isn't affiliated with CAA anymore, technically. I do really believe that's the genesis of it all. And that sort of the fuel to the fire was, why did like all these Knicks players just leave clutch upon not just joining the Knicks, but like these Knicks players left. So I don't know if there's been other stuff behind the scenes where Rich Paul feels like maybe they haven't treated his clients well, if they've had
Cam Reddish has been was a big negative too more recently.
Right. So like there's stuff like that, but there hasn't been anything like Cam Reddish is not the guy that is going to cause this tenuous relation. Like he's not good enough for that to matter. And, you know, like, was it, I really, Nerlens Noel might be the big one, just because where Nerlens Noel ends up suing clutch at some point too. And it was so like, was there any like thing like on the Knicks part there that kind of helped fuel that a little bit?
Nerlens Noel lost the lawsuit. He didn't even win.
No, but still, it's like if like he's being advised, or if like or if you just think that the Knicks had something whispering in his ear to do it, and it had nothing to do with the Knicks either. Yeah. By the way, at that point, so I want to make that clear.
It's because he was suggested to sign for a different team, and they told him to not take that contract, and then he got hurt, and its value went straight through the floor. Like, had nothing to do with
the discrepancy there, because I'm not saying I don't believe. I don't know what happened, but I want to know like why Rich Paul would ever tell him to decline that money the Mavericks were offering. Like that's just not something I could picture. And there's also been rumblings that Rich Paul kowtows to like getting players to LeBron. Has Leon Rose kind of, spread that around the league behind the scenes and played up that narrative? That like shit in the NBA is so petty. I think fans understand that for the most people in the business. You and I certainly do. But if fans understand, like this league is just so petty. I do think we overestimate the power that agents actually have, but we underestimate the pettiness that drives so much of what happens behind the scenes in the NBA.
Especially when those agents then become in real positions of not even power for the players that are under them or they represent, but for their teams. Like the Lakers are clutch. The Knicks are indirectly CAA. Just those two teams more so than in every other team. It really shows how much Leon Rose, being now the president, obviously, but how much Rich Paul and LeBron James have had a held on the Lakers since LeBron got there anyway. That's extreme power that leads you to be able to show your pettiness.
And the other thing here that's just ridiculous is I think it was Stefan Bonnie of the New York Post had that it's believed by both sides that all this is salvageable if they just get into a room together. It's like, well, what the hell are we doing here?
It's been years. Why don't they do that?
It's just like, so you both believe that everything could be hunky-dory, then just like, what? Why? That just speaks, again, a nod to the pettiness.
Do you think that the reason this is even coming out, I know Dejounte Murray is the newest name, but if you were to put a percentage on it, like how much percent would it be Dejounte Murray based, percent Zach LaVine based, percent another player, or them just actually being like, we should probably work together at some point again?
My galaxy brain theory on this is that they are so desperate to get Zach LaVine somewhere that this is clutch driven. And it's not going to be the Knicks. If they trade for Zach LaVine, it better be because the price tag was so low. And like you were able to give up RJ as part of that.
RJ, Evan, and no picks.
Yeah, I would give up. I still think Zach LaVine's undervalued now relative to this team. I think he gives them an element that they don't necessarily have. And he's more scalable than a RJ Barrett next to a Randall and Brunson, and kind of making him your third option. There's value to do it there. But that contract, you're worried about paying IQ. You're just going to throw $40 million plus $1 million a year of Zach LaVine on the books. So that is my actual theory, because I can't believe just because Dejounte Murray signed an extension to stay in Atlanta, that Dejounte Murray's that unhappy in Atlanta and wants to get to New York, because I do think that I was actually surprised Murray signed that extension. I tend to be higher on Murray than most, but I thought he would have gotten more either from the Hawks or on the open market. So I think it's more Zach. I can't think of another player on clutch. Like, is it Colin Sexton? Like, they really want Colin Sexton in New York? I don't
throw another guard in there. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. The New York's just collecting them.
I know Murray and LaVine are both guards too, but at least Murray can cover threes and LaVine's one of the top scorers in the league when he wants to be. But Colin Sexton would just be like, here, add him to the Knicks,
So like thinking of just off the cuff, like the clients on clutch, I don't think this is about another client. I'm trying to think of the clutch clients that the Knicks would be sort of realistically lusting after, to where they would be the ones.
Here, if you filibuster for a second, I'll look it up for you.
Go ahead. I think, look, so they have, because I have it here. I mean, like, maybe I can't, I'm just looking at all of these. I mean, is Jordan Clarkson's a clutch client, isn't he? He might be on there. KCP's a clutch client. Anthony
what
Davis.
Sucks is that if you just took away how terrible of a person he is recently, like the best one on here that would have been available is Miles Bridges, but you can't do that.
And I would just argue that Miles Bridges is fairly overrated on the basketball court anyway. The one that it could be is just like, is Jeremy Grant trying to plot his escape from Portland at the moment? It's like, well, I signed this 5-year deal and I'm playing pretty well, but damn, like this team isn't headed anywhere special anytime soon.
And they want to take the ball in his hands anyway. They want to let Scoot and Shaedon Sharp actually do what they're doing now. And Simons.
So I still think it would be Zach LaVine related, unless is Clutch hoping that, and this just doesn't make any sense, because I think he's going to get a no-brainer max. Are they hoping that the Knicks are a team that can drive up the asking price for Tyrese Maxey? And it's, well, the Knicks don't have max cap space and he's going to get a max anyway. Might make an all NBA team and get that type of a max. So it just feels like a Zach LaVine thing, where he's so unhappy in Chicago. The Bulls are playing well without him, that they want to get him somewhere where perhaps he wants to go. And I know he mentioned, I think it was Miami and Sacramento as his primary destinations. I don't know if I can't remember if New York was mentioned there. I'm just going to attribute it to Zach LaVine, because I can't, probably for lack of inventiveness on my end, because I can't find anyone else that stands out.
To go back to Dejounte Murray, though, what would be the deal you think the Knicks would or could send to get him off Atlanta?
I don't know,
The
honestly, because
toughest part is only making 18 million this year. He doesn't. RJ is making 23. I literally, when I made a fake trade, I had to throw in another player. Which could you get Murray and Sadiq Bey in a package deal? I mean,
how many picks are you giving up then? That'll work financially, but Atlanta's trying to cut costs long term. I don't know that they want RJ Barrett's money on the books. And I think coming back to that, I know the report was that many prominent people in the organization view Murray as the ideal trade target. Those people need to be fired. Just because if this has nothing to do with Murray, but the fit on this roster, because here's who's not being dealt in that trade: Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle. And so already that becomes an iffy fit with Dejounte Murray, just how much he prefers to have the ball. He's come a long way offensively, though. I know a lot of people say he's ball dominant. I think the shot, the off-ball stuff from him has come a long way. But the Hawks aren't going to want RJ Barrett. And so is RJ Barrett still on this roster? And now you want to add Dejounte Murray to the equation? Explain to me how that's ideal. But if it's a matter of, well, the opportunity cost just feels kind of low. The Hawks are looking to cut money long-term. Is it Fournier and picks? And then you're just viewing this as kind of we'll dump RJ over the offseason and we're just going to view this as an asset play. We actually think that Murray's going to be a little bit cheaper moving forward than Emmanuel Quickley, which is just, that would be mind-blowing if that's one of the reasons you're interested in Murray, is because, well, we don't want to pay IQ. And so we know that Murray's contract starts at about 24.8 next year. Yeah. And we think IQ is going to get more. Yeah. And that would be just wild. Like that would be a wild logic to this. I wonder
it can't even be just Fournier, because then you're literally just adding another dude that's actually in the rotation to the guys that are in your rotation. Even if you cut all of Grimes' minutes all together,
RJ becomes the new Fournier in that scenario, in which case I might be on board. That's a lot of money just sitting on the bench for the next few years, but that feels like it would need to be.
There's a lot of Knicks fans that would go absolutely like riot outside the Garden, no matter how bad this dude does.
And I do think I'm not advocating for the Knicks to trade for Murray, but if the price is just so low where it's like Fournier and 2 picks and like they're not like any of these unprotected ones in 2029 or something, from an asset play perspective, if you can finagle it with a third team where RJ is going out, I don't necessarily hate it, but it does make it harder. It doesn't make it any harder to play Emmanuel Quickley more than you are now, but it does make it harder to expand his role. Yeah. And then you're still just down a wing defender, because if that's what we want to consider RJ, and like Murray's not that guy, he's still going to be better off at the point of attack. He's regressed on that a little bit. So, I mean, I would pay to see Brunson, Murray, and Quickley just spend minutes together. It would be fun. I'm just not, if I'm the Knicks, in the business of giving up a ton of assets to get him. And I don't think Murray's had a good year. So I don't know why the Hawks would just be like, yeah, we'll just take expiring money and 2 protected firsts. So it just doesn't feel like a good match, which is why I'm so is there something else behind the scenes that the Knicks think they're going to end up getting rid of Julius and RJ, in which case then Murray makes a little bit more sense. But Randall's played well enough over the past basically 5-6 weeks, whatever it's been, to where like, why are you like, you have him in house, he's bigger. So it's just a weird, the Dejounte Murray discourse is just so weird based on the makeup of this team.
Where do you think Dejounte's more likely to go? Like, what is his top 2 areas that wouldn't be Atlanta?
I think Utah is a team to keep an eye on. Another team I would keep an eye on is New Orleans, just because I think they need a lead guard, and I know some people won't love the fit there. But that would be a team I'd keep an eye on.
He'd still be third in line to get the ball, though, behind Zion and Brandon Ingram. I feel like it's kind of, I know he's a point guard instead of those guys, but I feel like that leads to sign similar problems than he is now, isn't it?
Yeah, there would be some similar issues there, but I think with Brandon Ingram coming up on his next deal, they might view that as sort of emergency insurance if they decide to move him or Zion type deal. Because if New Orleans gets rid of either one of those 2 players, they're not going to be looking to rebuild, which I think is sort of an underrated aspect. Another team, their fans will hate it, Oklahoma City, I would keep an eye on. That feels like a very middle ground move for them, where imagine going from Giddey to Dejounte Murray. Just imagine that is a monster upgrade. And he poses some of the same limitations as Giddey does in terms of wanting the ball, but he's just a better shooter, a better defender. And so I actually do think Oklahoma City needs another. I was writing about this and I said they need another ball handler that has some jiggle and joggle to him. And like Jalen Williams is very get downhill. Shea has that jiggle and joggle. But like, that's kind of it. Giddey doesn't have it, and defenses don't treat him like it. Case and Wallace is a little bit passive there. So those are teams that I think would be really interesting. OKC, are they willing to part with assets? It feels like a middle ground to where this isn't going to force you to empty your asset stores. This dude is under contract, so you don't have to worry about him hitting free agency, but he's also not under contract for an arm and a leg. So you're not worried about other contracts coming from some of your other players. That's a sneaky team, but I think them and Utah would be my two favorite spots for Murray. And off the top of my head, is there just another team that I could see sneaking in there?
Bill Simmons, because I listened to the Simmons podcast, he said the Rockets, and I actually liked the thought process there. But but part of that was that he wanted to bail on Jalen Green, which might be a whole different issue.
Look, no, that's you want to bail on Jalen Green, fine, but is Atlanta, again, I don't think Atlanta is trying to rebuild. And so you need teams that have like picks that can either be rerouted, or it's like, or you're not dealing them damaged goods alone. And like the Rockets, how much of their own picks are they going to send Atlanta? And Jalen Green is kind of just a distressed asset at this point. But a team that I would like, but like the Lakers at this point, I know I'm
sure they would love that.
A better shooter there, but like with Gabe Vincent injured and D'Lo's not even starting right now, and Murray spaces the floor enough for it to work, because my dogs don't like it. They're annoyed about me suggesting Murray the Lakers. Like, that's a team where they might have enough to get him if Atlanta's just trying to get rid of, like, just want short-term money and a first-round pick and some swaps. Like, I don't know if that's enough to get you Murray, but that would be a team where I actually think he'd be a fantastic fit.
Last Atlanta question, and then I have one more New York, and we can get out of here because I have to get ready for work. Why would the Hawks why does Trae Young being traded never get brought up? Why is that? Like, is he that married to the city? Do they think he doesn't value that would match up to what he's worth to them? Like, why is it never Trae Young? Why is it always Dejounte?
It's harder to admit that the guy you have dubbed your franchise cornerstone is the problem more than it is to admit that the coaches, the players around him are the issue. I also tend to believe that Trae Young is almost underrated at this point because of what he can do as a passer, and just like his ability to bend defenses is not something you're getting in Dejounte Murray. It's something you get in maybe 10 to 12 other players in the league right now when you're looking at primary ball handlers. I think they've done a very poor job of building properly around him. I actually didn't hate the Murray fit, but when you kind of look at what they've done with their bigger players around him, I haven't really loved any of it. Jalen Johnson was great before he got injured, but just like the DeAndre Hunter, these middling wings or these non-wings or these centers who aren't super versatile, or Onyeka Okongwu, he's versatile, but like Clint Capella is still clogging up the pipeline there. So it's just easier to admit. There's also the element of, do you not want to know what happens if you put Trae Young on the trade market? Because what if the offers just aren't, what if you're getting comparable offers from Murray and Trae Young? And that's just a tougher pill to swallow. I do think that Trae Young is just more of a rarity than a Dejounte Murray type, though. And I think that's ultimately where I land. It might take, you have to build the team very specifically around him, but he is a player where it's at least worth contemplating doing that than if it's doing that for Dejounte Murray, just as the example.
And Dan, the last next question: who is a player that actually the Knicks could or should be looking at to trade for before the trade deadline that might not be going through the media ringer right now? No Dejounte Murray, no Zach LaVine, no OG Anunoby. Who's someone we should actually be looking out for? I'm not going to let you say Daniel Gafford because you said him before, and also I know you weren't going to say him anyway, but definitely no 15 minutes or less centers.
No, man, that's a good question. I guess I don't have a great answer. I have an answer that I don't think anyone's going to like. But like, if you're talking about a deal that it might cost you some draft equity, I'm assuming not a first round pick, and you're getting an expiring contract, but also someone who could help you. You're getting off RJ Barrett in the process. Gordon Hayward, like, use the Fournier Barrett money for Gordon Hayward and whoever else is needed in Charlotte to make the money work. I mean, if you get Cody Martin as part of that deal, I'd love it. But like, that would be someone where it's okay. It's short term. He's going to help us more than RJ at this point. He's more plug and play on offense. He's injured right now because Gordon Hayward always gets injured. But again, it's not about having heavily invested equity in him. It's just, here's a dude that could help us right now this season, doesn't limit our optionality. And I think it would be, do I think the Knicks would do this? No. But like, if you're giving up RJ for just an expiring contract of a player that you don't think you're going to keep him around, you're taking your medicine and you're admitting that you made a pretty big mistake. I don't know if the franchise is there with him right now. And I want to mention another name. He's been going through the rumor now, and I've seen a lot of Knicks people like him. I love Larry Markkinen. I don't love him for this team because of what he costs to get. And then we're just saying that he's a wing at that point. So you're giving up probably at least the equivalent of 4 first-round picks to get him. You're going to have to pay him soon. And like you're playing him with Randall. So he's going to be a 3. We've shown he can play the 3, but he's not going to do anything for your wing defense. He's probably better than RJ Barrett on wing defense on a lot of nights.
He's at least longer than RJ Barrett.
Right. So I like Larry Markkinen. He could do a lot for this team, but it's just different when you have to give up so much to get him. And so I do not actually love him for this team.
That's fair. I think that Larry Markkinen is more meant to play the 4 than the 3 in today's NBA. And while he was okay in Cleveland, he's just been so much better playing the 4 and being the primary in Utah.
He needs to go to OKC or Miami. I don't know if Miami is enough to get him. Like 3 first-round picks, I think they can throw on the table. Plus,
you can't bring up Miami on a Knicks podcast, man. You just hurt me a little bit.
In terms of basketball, OKC is my favorite destination for him at the moment. But and I wish there was like I've thought about Kyle Kuzma for the Knicks a little bit because he's a lot better defensively than people think. But I just don't know if he has the capacity to play a lot differently on this team. I think you need to put him on a team that's going to generate better spacing. I'd love to see Denny Avdia on this team, but I don't think Washington's going to get rid of him after extending him. And there are players that I would love, but they're just not. Their teams aren't going to get rid of them. Yeah, those would just be some of the names that I've been ruminating. Gordon Hayward's one that I've thought probably way too much about, quite frankly.
That's fair. I think at the end of all this, it's going to end up being. I like Gordon Hayward. If it ends up being just DeMar DeRozan and they're like, this is just for us to be able to sign IQ, I would actually be not unhappy about it at the end of the day. I want IQ to stay on this team somehow, which goes back to the beginning of this podcast. But
the player that I was not hoping, but if you're a Knicks fan, I was like, maybe he just gets unhappy with what's going on there. It's just like Jaren Jackson Jr. He's coming up on his next deal. That is someone he kind of infringes upon both Mitch and Randall. So that gets a little weird, but like you want to have a modern day center who also fits the rim protecting motif of Tibbs. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a spectacular player. He doesn't seem like he's going to be getting unhappy in Memphis. At least, who knows? But
yeah, I don't see that happening. On the bright side, if they were to ever bring in Jaren Jackson Jr. somehow, because he still always gets in foul trouble, not always, but like still occasionally gets in foul trouble and occasionally doesn't get hurt too much, but a little here and there, we'd still be able to see Hartenstein sometimes, which is a fan favorite. So
have you given any thought to Jeremy Grant? If I could ask you really quickly, I've thought about him and I prefer him at the 4, but like when you're looking at a Harrison Barnes or a Bojan Bogdanovic or a Kyle Kuzma, he is far more equipped to like play the 3 and defend down than a lot of those other guys.
I thought about Jeremy Grant a lot last year, but I think when he signed the extension and just the amount of money he's going to be pulling now, I find he's getting outpaid more than what I think his value is. And it's always hard to sell yourself as a fan or the team and bringing that in, unless that person is getting you to title contention, not just to maybe win another game or 2 in the same round you just made, which is kind of where I'm at.
If it just comes down to, do you want the next 4 years of Jeremy Grant at his price point, which is like, let's say, I don't know, 4 and 120 about 4 and 130, or do you want the next 3 years of RJ Barrett's deal?
I would rather Jeremy Grant. There still are more majority RJ Barrett people than Jeremy Grant people, but I'm pretty sure a lot of Knicks fans don't even watch Jeremy Grant and haven't watched him in years.
That's fair enough. We just mentioned too many non-guards. Like they should really just trade for Anthony Simons at this point. That's how this all ends.
Oh yeah, I think if they had a coach that wasn't Tibbs, they should have a team of everyone 1 through 3. They have one center. They can keep Mitch, and everyone else would be below 6, 7, and then see how it goes. One can dream, though, right? Dan, I do have to get out of here, so if you want to plug anything you want to plug, and we'll be able to go.
The only thing I'll plug is, you can find me on Bleacher Report. I'm all over. So if you don't know what Bleacher Report is, I don't really think they need me to plug them. Hardwood Knocks does need me to plug them, though. So go check us out. Hardwood Knocks, spelled exactly as it sounds. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your pods. We have a lot of fun over there. We cover the league at large, and we strive to be the least insufferable national NBA podcast around. So go check us out.
Least insufferable. You're really shooting for the stars there, man. I like it.
I cannot give myself compliments. Anything that I do, I automatically. So it's going to be self-deprecating. We have a lot of fun. I will say we're pretty, we talk a lot of hardcore basketball stuff, but I do think Grant and I are pretty relatable. and personable. And so I think, and we don't take ourselves too seriously. So just, if you're a Knicks fan, go check us out over there. We're not talking Knicks all the time, obviously, but I think it's important if you're a fan of a single team, as someone who grew up as a fan of a single team, I always loved having a pulse on the rest of the league, and we try and give you that grip on it.
Facts. Agreed entirely. And Hardwood Knocks is just one letter away from Hardwood Knicks. So if you don't know how to spell it, then spell it like that and then change the I into an O. And there you go. Find him at DanFavale at both Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Joe Yolk, JOEYO1K. Make sure to check out all the Big Nick Energy merch at bignickenergy.com. If you don't follow us by now, I'd be really amazed, but definitely buy our merch. It's really, really cool. This hat's probably my favorite thing we sell. There's a bunch of Tibbs shirts if you like Tibbs. Obviously, a bunch of Jalen Brunson stuff, and you can't go wrong there. Let's go, Knicks.
I need to see the sicko that has Tibbs merch. Sorry to interrupt. I need to see the sicko that has Tom Thibodeau merch.
My fiance actually wears a Tibbs shirt to bed because we got like a set of like 8 or 9 of the shirts that Vin made, and it's her favorite one. I'll send it to you. Not that actual shirt, but I'll send you the link to the shirt that she wears. It's literally Tibbs dressed like a gangster in the hood, and I think he has a Lucy in his ear. It's ridiculous. Dan, thank you so much, man. Much appreciated. Let's go, Knicks. Peace.